very lonely dealing with it until I, saw a therapist myself.
How do they function day to day coexisting with anxiety? I'm a very anxious person, cannot fix it really.
Okay, if you don't feel anxious about anything, then you're probably not gonna care about a lot
Yeah,
of
that's
things.
quite scary too.
Companies.
3 ways to manage our anxiety
Right.
for general public. So one of it would be grounding. What would you suggest for the other two?
Welcome to Teabreaks with Therapists, where we brew conversations on mental health one sip at a time. I'm your host Chayan, and in this unique series, we aim to break the stigma surrounding mental health by engaging in bite-sized, insightful interviews with experienced mental health practitioners. So grab your favorite beverage, get cozy, and let's dive into the fascinating world of psychology, one tea break at a time.
Anxiety, restlessness, fatigue, sleep disturbances, muscle tension, and irritability. These are some of the common signs of anxiety. And today we have our guest speaker here, Kinji, to walk us through about anxiety, a topic that is very close to his heart. So before we dive deeper, Kinji, can you just introduce yourself to us?
I'm Kinji. I'm a mental health therapist or counselor at Remind Psychology Center. I'm currently also a sessional tutor at Monash University.
Okay.
I'm teaching developmental psychology for an undergraduate psychology program. Why I got into mental health work is because, firstly, because of my own struggle with anxiety, among other mental health issues. I really wanted to understand what was happening to myself, and through that process of studying, getting
Yeah.
knowledge about it, I also realized that a lot of people have mental health issues, but then it's something that people don't talk about,
Yeah.
and it's so stigmatized in Malaysia especially, and people don't really prioritize it, I guess, compared to their physical health. It's quite scary even to not prioritize it, because I think a lot of our societal issues can be stemmed from mental health problems that people are dealing with.
Yep.
Sometimes they channel it into rage, and then that's why all these crazy things happening in the world. This is something I'm very passionate about, that I want to contribute to. So that's why I got into psychology and mental health.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kinji, for introducing a little bit about how you have experienced anxiety. And if you don't mind sharing a little bit, if you have experienced anxiety since childhood, can you tell us more about it?
Well, first of all, maybe I'll briefly define anxiety for our audience. So, anxiety is basically the feeling of uneasiness, such as intense worry or fear about something. People with anxiety, they always have a lot of what if thoughts. What if my car breaks down? What if I get fired? What if I make mistakes at work, or I fail my assignments? There's like always something to be worried about, to be concerned about. Life is not easy. We have a lot to deal with. And so that's anxiety, and usually it shows up physically as well in our body. Heart palpitations, sweaty palms. I've always had sweaty palms, and it makes me even more nervous to have sweaty palms.
Yeah.
And then headache sometimes, also stomach issues, which is what I have as well.
Okay.
Those are all like physical symptoms. So that's anxiety, and I've had to deal with anxiety for as long as I can remember. I think the earliest was kindergarten.
Right.
I remember going to kindergarten and always throwing up before or during class. And it's not just first day jitters, it's most of the days after that. I still feel the nervousness of going to school, and I throw up. And I threw up in front of the class, so that makes me even more anxious, right? Because it's embarrassing. And at that time, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have the knowledge or the language to name the experience. But now, looking back, I know that was probably anxiety. That was my one of the examples of my childhood anxiety. Other things would be just generally, I was always very anxious about how my day is gonna be at school.
Right.
Like I always, before school, I always think, I hope today will be okay. I hope today I won't get punished for something, or shamed, or teased, or singled out for something, or make a mistake. Because I always have that worry, even well into secondary school. So it's throughout the schooling days of like 10 years plus. I've always had that anxiety. It sort of got into other parts of my life, like even making friends was difficult because I have social anxiety. So I'm always worried how people will perceive me or judge me.
Yeah.
And that made me very anxious to talk to people, to
Yeah.
make conversations. At some point, I think in the earlier parts of my life, I was also very scared to maintain eye contact with people while I talk. Yeah, so that was my childhood and adolescence. I guess adulthood now, I still have experienced some of these anxiety symptoms. I still have tough time making new friends now.
Okay.
I'm more out of my shell now, but I still have that anxiety. Driving is something that I'm very anxious about still. I didn't drive for almost a year after I got my P license. Now I start driving and I get anxious still when I drive in heavy traffic or when I drive to new places or far away places. I always have to pre-plan everything, like the Google map, and then see how the road looks, and then spend a chunk of time there just to prep myself so that I don't feel anxious. So driving is one of them, parking as well, always part and parcel. Driving, parking. So that was basically my experience with anxiety. Overall, I would say that it's a feeling that I'm always on edge. I'm always preparing for something. I'm always like being careful about something so I don't mess up. So that's the general feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely sounds like a lot of preparation has to be done before. In fact, even one of my clients that I've been seeing, he mentioned that he has travel anxiety, so he has to pack his stuff, have a checklist, and make sure he gets everything inside his luggage. Even when he has already fulfilled the checklist, he'll still go over and over again and still feeling anxious. And it sounds a bit daunting for you as well to experience that even from childhood itself. And how did you navigate through that? Were you battling it alone, or did you have someone that you could share it with?
For the longest time, it felt like I was battling it alone because my parents didn't really understand what anxiety is all about. I'm educating them more about it now, but as a child, I myself didn't have the knowledge or the language. It felt very lonely, really, it felt very lonely. Although anxiety is something that a lot of people experience, but they don't always share it with each other. So it was very lonely dealing with it until I saw a therapist myself a few years back. Therapy helped me, it helped me share, it helped me make sense of things. Obviously, reading up on things on the internet and YouTube and listening to mental health podcasts helped me feel less alone. I guess online forums, there is a community there that people deal with the same thing and they talk about it. And when I read these things, I'm like, oh, there are people who have the exact same issues that I did. And it did make me feel a bit less lonely.
So you have mentioned that actually it's quite common for people to experience anxiety, and it's also something that you are very passionate about, and I believe that you are also working with a lot of patients with anxiety. If you could just walk us through the lens of people with anxiety, how do they function day to day coexisting with anxiety?
Right, that's a good question, right? Because sometimes it's always very hard for us to imagine what it's like for the other person. They might seem calm on the outside, but a million things is going on in the brain. I would share from my own experience, like my observations from clients or from other people in my life. I would say that people with anxiety, they see the world through a fear-based lens, right? So they move through the world with the fear of being judged, with the fear of being shamed, with the fear of not being enough, with the fear of messing up and making mistakes and then punished for it. So there's so much of that fear, and they move through the world with that fear. And that is why people with anxiety, like me, are always overly cautious and overly careful when we do things. Like you say, triple checking the travel checklist, triple checking every work we do. See how this affects work performance for some people as well. Because they're very slow at work because they're always triple checking everything. And so a lot of over preparation and over planning. And all this can be really tiring. Sometimes at the end of
tiring.
exactly, it already sounds tiring, right? And at the end of the day, sometimes I feel so tired, and I don't know why. Then I think back, oh, it's all those anxious thoughts and preparation for something that may or may not even happen, right? But we just prepare anyway, just in case. Maybe I can give one example of my own, like how, like today I woke up, right? I have to prepare for the this filming
Yeah.
interview session, I wake up early because I don't know how the jam would be.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I already worry about driving here, even though I'm familiar with this place,
Yes.
but I'm a bit uncertain how it would be. Then will there be parking?
Yeah.
And then I worry if I'll mess up this interview, if I'll mess up my life. And then I have stomach issues, also like gastric issues, partly because of my anxiety. So I worry, will I be hungry very quickly? So you could see the anxiety spiraling from
Yeah.
one thought to another thought to another. Right. So that's how my day to day goes. Some days are easier than the others, depending on what I have to do on that day.
It sounds like there is a looming cloud just following you everywhere. And I was just wondering, why are some people more vulnerable to experiencing anxiety compared to others?
Research has shown that anxiety can run in the family. So there is a genetic component to anxiety, just like a lot of other mental health problems, like depression. So there's a genetic component, but there's also environmental factors. So people whose family don't have anxiety, but they might have anxiety because of different things. For example, if they've been through trauma at some point in their lives, they might be more prone to having anxiety. So trauma maybe come from childhood abuse or domestic abuse in adulthood, or could be bullying. It could be, I guess, overly strict parenting. It could be all of those things. A lot of things can cause trauma. So if they've been through some sort of trauma, then they might be more prone to having anxiety. So that's one of the, and I guess, environmental factors. Another one could be chronic stressors. So chronic stressor means stressors that are long term. For example, if you have an exam that is short term, right? Because after that exam, you're like, okay, you can leave. But chronic stressors, long term one, it could be something like ongoing financial issues that you cannot solve it just like that, right? It takes, it prolongs. Or maybe ongoing workplace issues like toxic culture at workplace, issues with the boss or colleagues. So that's prolonged, right? You have to deal with that every single day. So that's one of them. Or it could be ongoing relationship issues
Okay.
with your partner,
Right.
or it could be you are a caregiver for an elderly patient or a parent.
Okay.
That's long term. So all of these chronic long term stresses, I mean, imagine how the toll it takes on your brain, right?
Yeah.
So that can, you know, give you a high chance to experience anxiety. So that's one of the things. Another one is physical illness.
Okay.
So like my stomach issue,
Yes.
or even some people with diabetes or any other chronic illness that they have to deal with every day. That can be a great source of anxiety as well, right? To deal with, because it does directly affect their daily functioning.
Yeah.
So they do have to work through how to coexist with that illness. So that obviously can make people very anxious. So these are some of the factors that makes people more prone to anxiety.
Right, right. What are your thoughts then about, how some people would say, oh yeah, I'm a very anxious person, I cannot fix it already. So what do you think about anxiety in terms of management? Is it something to be like fixed and then it will be gone?
I don't see it as something to be fixed. Anxiousness is a feeling.
Yeah.
We all feel anxious, but the problem comes when, okay, if you don't feel anxious about anything, then you're probably not going to care about a lot
Yeah,
of
that's
things.
quite scary too.
So you're not care about that exam, you're not going to study, you're not going to work hard for that promotion or whatever goal that you have. There's a function to it, but the problem becomes a problem when it's too severe and it impedes your daily functioning, like how it does mine, right? I keep
Right.
overthinking and over-planning. So that becomes an issue when it affects your daily life. So I don't see it as a problem to be fixed, but more like try to make it more manageable instead of seeing it as an enemy to be eliminated. Emotions are there for a reason,
Yeah.
right? We just need to know how to regulate it to be optimum level.
That's a really, really interesting statement, right? Emotions are there for a reason, guys. So how then do you help your patients to overcome anxiety?
Right, so usually, I mean, I draw from research, obviously, but I also sometimes my own experience of dealing with anxiety. So maybe I'll share some of what I do and what is also backed by research. So one of the main, I guess, simple technique is grounding. So grounding technique. So what I do is they call it the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. So basically, when you're anxious or stressed, you name 5 things you can see around the room, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
So basically the 5 senses.
Yeah,
Okay.
engage all your 5 senses. And you don't always have to follow this strictly, like
Yeah.
5-4-3-2-1. You can play around with it.
Yeah.
And customize it to your own preference. So basically, when I'm feeling really anxious now, my mind is racing, I quickly look around the room and I name 5 things I can see, like the plant, like the board there, or this wooden thing, the mirror, the bag there, the switch there.
Right.
And I do it like, if I do it in real life, I do it slowly. And the reasoning for grounding is because when we're anxious, our mind is racing, right? It's chaotic.
Yeah.
And so grounding brings us back to the present moment. So our mind isn't overly focused on all the other spiral of anxiety thoughts. We bring the attention back to the present by using our 5 senses to connect ourselves with our physical surroundings.
Okay.
So that's the theory behind grounding. And I mean, it doesn't get rid of the anxiety completely, but it does help you get centered
Yeah.
onto the present so that you have time to just sit down and calm down a little bit. It has a calming effect. It basically telling your brain to calm down.
So grounding is one.
Yeah, so grounding is one of the ways, and it's simple enough to do. I think a lot of people can do it, but it comes with practice. So practice enough times that it becomes natural, that you don't feel like a bit awkward
Yeah.
while you do it. Because when I first do it was very awkward. I didn't know what I was doing. So definitely practice.
Practice.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one, even if I don't go for therapy, I can also.
Try it on your own. Yeah.
Okay. So what other, let's say we're gonna have like top 3 ways to manage our anxiety for general public. So one of it would be grounding. What would you suggest for the other 2?
The other one, I would say deep breathing exercise.
Okay.
And this is a common one. I think a lot of people have heard of breathing exercise, right?
Right.
I mean, breathing is easy enough. We all do it to stay alive.
Yes.
But breathing exercise takes a certain technique. So basically, breathing exercise, there's a lot of variations of it. I use the 4-7-8 method. Inhale for 4 seconds. I hold for 7 seconds, and I exhale for 8 seconds. Exhale is always longer than the inhale, right? So that's 4-7-8. There's a lot of other methods. So again, just find one that works the best for you. And the theory behind breathing exercise is it's really to tell our nervous system to calm down. Because when we're anxious, our breathing becomes very rapid and very shallow and very inconsistent. And we're not even aware of it most of the time. And so what we do is we are purposely bringing our breathing back to a more slower and consistent pace. And there's also, it's also a way to get our attention back, focus on the breathing.
Right.
Instead of all the anxious thoughts, we're focusing everything on the breath. So it's like the breathing is like an attentional anchoring.
Intentional anchoring, that's a good one. And what about the last anxiety management style?
So this one's simple enough. I journal. A lot of people journal as well. So I journal, meaning I write down my thoughts and my emotions when something really upsetting. So I can only do this when I'm calm.
Okay.
So usually it will be after the breathing and after the grounding.
Right.
Once my body and mind is a little bit calmer, I can sit down and I can write down what actually happened. So I write down the situation, what happened, and then I write down my thoughts, all the anxious thoughts that I have.
Right.
And usually I have a lot because I spiral, so I would write all of it down. So for me, it helps because it's like a release. I'm releasing all of that anxious thoughts onto paper. So it's easier for me to look at it and see, oh, this is what is going on inside of me. And then once I write it out on paper, it's also more organized. It's not chaotic like in my mind. It's more organized. I can see it there. And it's easier for me to challenge the thought. Or question I get to question, once I look at the thought, I get to question how valid is the thought? How realistic is it actually? Is this habitual thinking, or is it actually real, or is it just my habit of thinking this way? It helps me think clearly and more rationally.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kinji, for sharing. So we have 3 methods to manage anxiety. Firstly, there is the grounding technique, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, using all your 5 senses to bring yourself back to the present. Secondly, we have breathing exercises. So you can try Kinji's 4, 7, 8. So inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, then exhale for 8 seconds, just to center your attention again. And last but not least, to journal. You can write down your anxious thoughts and make sure that it's not tangled up here in your mind, but really having a better visualization of what's going on in your mind. Is that correct, Kinji?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so before we wrap our episode for today, Kinji, can you just share with us any take-home message with the public today?
If anyone is dealing with anxiety out there, it's okay, you are heard, you are seen. Most, if not everyone, deals with anxiety at some point in their lives, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. Anxiety is just an emotion that tells us something. It's functional, so there is a function to it, but it becomes an issue when it impedes your life functioning. So when that happens, try to use those techniques to help you, or any other techniques that you might find helpful. If it's very severe, try to seek professional help like therapy, so that your therapist can work together with you to help you with it. It's not a lost cause. Like I deal with anxiety and I'm still dealing with it now, and it can be manageable.
Wow, thank you so much for the heartfelt message, Kinji. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Really hope as well that you can overcome anxiety throughout your day-to-day functioning, and also inspire the rest to seek professional help if they need to. So thank you so much. And of course, if this episode resonates with you, feel free to save this and watch it later, or you can even share it with your loved ones. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.